So the first activity I did was donating blood at Bloodworks Northwest in Tequila, and I thought it was important to donate blood because when you donate a pint of blood, you save 3 lives. And I was also curious about like what are the requirements and how their process is. I just got done donating blood and I learned a lot because they have a lot of requirements, like your blood pressure has to be normal and your iron level has to be at least at 38. And then I learned how their process goes. And like they also told me again that you were saving 3 lives. And yeah. The second activity I did was interview a firefighter, and we did this at the Kent Fire Station. And I thought interviewing a firefighter was important to know how fast they respond to emergency calls and how they react and how they feel about it and where they okay, we're gonna just
Is like when you get an emergency call, like what is the drill? Like how do you guys get ready for it and leave as fast as you guys can to help the person?
Okay, so I'm assuming you're speaking about the firefighters that work on the fire engines, which is, I don't do that. So what they do is about 80 times per day, we get 911 calls asking for a response. And it can be anything from an aid call, which is about 80% of our jobs, to a fire, hazardous materials, car crashes, a wide variety of things. How we respond depends partly on what we're going to. So if it's an aid call, the firefighters can go in their uniforms and they simply put on gloves, they put on goggles, they put on a mask if necessary, but they just put all their firefighting gear, what we call bunker gear, in the rig with them, and then they leave. If they're going to a car crash, they're going to a hazardous materials call, they're going to a fire, then before they leave, they have to put on all of their firefighting gear over their uniform. So there's a little bit of preparation that goes into depending on the type of call. We give our firefighters 1 minute during the day to get out of the fire station, meaning from the time the alarm goes off to the time that that engine is heading out the bay doors, it has to be within 1 minute. That's our standard. Our typical response is about 5 minutes, and then obviously dealing with whatever it is that they're going to, that all depends on what the call is.
Okay. What is the next one?
What do they do when there's like non-emergency call?
You mean when they're not actively on calls? They do a lot of things. Training is probably the most important thing. We talk about, you practice like you play and you play like you practice, meaning you train the way that you're actually going to do things. And the best way to instill discipline and a standardized response in people is to do it repetitively so that when it happens, you know exactly what to do. We talk about standard situations, standard response, standard outcomes, meaning if you have a situation that we face all the time and you do the same thing, it should always end up the same way. And if that same way is a safe outcome for everybody, then that's what we do. So training is a huge part of what we do. The other part that we do spend a lot of time in is public relations. We go out and deal with the public all the time. We go to schools, usually elementary schools, but I'm sure you've seen firefighters or our staff at Kentwood in your health classes, teaching classes, maybe a CPR class, something like that. Those are very, very common. The rest of the time, they may be in class doing other types of training, medical training. where they have to maintain certifications. Our hazardous materials team has to maintain certifications. Our ladder crews have to maintain high angle rescue certifications, water rescue. So there's a lot of things that we have to do just to stay certified so that we can stay within the boundaries of the law and optimize our ability to take care of problems.
Okay. And our last question is, the fire truck, some are very big. Do you guys have 2 drivers that handle the fire truck, and like how do you guys operate it when it comes down to an emergency?
So the term fire truck is kind of a general term, all right? We have 3 basic types of apparatus. We have aid cars, which have 2 people in them, a driver and an officer. You know, a lot of people call them ambulances, but we call them aid cars. We have engines, which have 3 people, a driver, an officer, and a third person that rides in the back. They carry water, pump, ladders, fire hose. They're the mainstay of our fire department. Every fire station, all 13 of our stations, have a fire engine in them. Only 3 of our stations have aid cars in them. And then we have ladder trucks. Ladder trucks are much longer than a fire engine. They carry very little water on them, but they carry a lot of rescue equipment, forcible entry equipment. Those do have 3 people on them as well, but one of those people rides in the very back, and because they're tillered ladders, they steer from the back as well.
Okay. Well, thank you for talking to us.
We just finished interviewing a firefighter and we learned a lot. There goes to a lot to being a firefighter. They don't have a break. They're always training. They have 3 different kinds of truck. Like one truck is for like meds. One truck has like a hose and a ladder. One has water. It's so complicated and difficult to understand, but there's a lot to go to it, and they're always helping and running around. They're not just sitting. The third activity I did was interview a police officer at Kent Station, and I thought this was important because they're always on call, they're always working, and it's like their situation is different from everyone else's because theirs is unpredictable. Question is like, how do you prepare for emergency drills
Emergency drills?
or like emergency calls?
Emergency calls. Okay. So generally, in terms of for law enforcement, it's not any different than any type of service where you have emergency services. You first of all, you train and you get trained up in terms of what you need to do. So on a day-to-day basis, every quarter we qualify, like here in our department, we qualify with firearms. We also do defensive tactics training. And then individually, officers will go, and most of us belong to a gym, and so we'll maintain a physical fitness. We'll maintain in terms of the skill sets, whether with the tools that we carry, and then also mentally we'll review scenarios on a consistent basis, and we'll go over stuff in training, where we'll say, okay, hey, we had this incident, we would like it handled this way, or here's some options in terms of handling it. So preparing for it it's a physical, it's an emotional, and it's a mental preparation. So you're consistently running through these things in your mind, through your daily life, or through your daily work environment. And we consistently talk about them. So that's how we kind of prepare for it.
So I know firefighters have 1 minute to leave out of their station. How fast do you guys leave?
Oh, fire, you mean second responders?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, so what'll happen is that for the most part, police officers are available. Basically at the moment that we're notified, we're available. And so there's not really a downtime for police officers. So it all depends what agency you're working for. In this particular agency, in a lot of more metropolitan areas, you're going to have officers that are going to be available very quickly. If you look at more rural or less populated areas, officers tend to be spread out. So when you talk about response times, here Kent offers a response time generally about 3 minutes from the time you pick up the phone to the time that we get there for priority calls. Will be less than that a lot of the time. But at the outset, it would be about 3 minutes. Now, when you look at some other places that are more rural, you could have up to a 45-minute response time on a priority call. It all depends. When you look at Eastern Washington and some of the vast areas they have to cover, you literally could call 911 for a serious crime, and it would take the officers about 45 minutes to get there.
How do you keep your personal life and your work life separate? Do you have people coming towards you while you're like out, not in your uniform?
So that is always something that's very interesting. There are, most officers don't live generally where they work. And they do that because they don't want to run into the same people that they have to deal with professionally and then personally. One of the things that you find is that people, if they see you and recognize you, they want to engage you with conversation or questions, or they're upset about something, and it's your now personal time, so you need a separation. So most officers don't live where they work, and that's one of the reasons for that. However, we do consistently run into people that we've had to deal with, generally in terms of a criminal type of situation. We will run into them consistently off duty, and so that's something that we always have to be prepared for. That's why most officers will carry their credentials and their firearm with them when they're off duty, simply because we run into bad people who aren't happy that we took law enforcement action against them prior to. So that's always something we have to be vigilant of. And so that's kind of the old joke of we're always on duty even when we're off duty, kind of atmosphere. So we're always kind of a little bit on edge for that.
And then what do you do on your downtime when you're here?
When I'm here?
Yeah.
Well, if it's my downtime, I'm not here. You mean when we're just
Not on call.
So not on call, so that would be different. So we also consistently have, we have a lot of training material that we get. We have emails that we have to follow up on. We have things from evidence or from records. So we are consistently doing, first of all, paperwork, which you never see it in a movie. You'll have an incident, a critical incident, and then let's say that critical incident's over within about 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then you'll sit down and have an hour and a half, 2 hours worth of paperwork. Well, they never show that in a movie. They never show the officer sitting down and doing all the paperwork, because that'd be a pretty darn boring movie. But that's exactly what happens is that we'll have a critical incident or any type of incident that we deal with, then we have to go back and we have to write a report on it. And so that's, if you want to call that downtime, when we're not on a call, but we're writing up the reports on that, we're having to submit the photographs, we're having to put in evidence into, submit evidence into evidence. We're having follow-up phone calls. So there's really not any downtime for us. It's not like the fire department where you can take a nap and watch a couple movies and kind of hang out. That's not the way we operate. We operate where we're continually engaged in something, some particular activity.
And my last question is, can you go over what you have on your uniform on a daily basis?
Sure, certainly can. So as I said, Pacific Northwest, jumpsuits are very, very common. A lot of parts of the other country, jumpsuits aren't. But you'll obviously wear a standard uniform that'll have patches on it, have a badge on it, have name tags on it. It'll identify you as a police officer. Obviously they'll say police, etc. on it. So that uniform varies in terms of if you're in colder climates, you wear a different type of clothes than if you're in warmer climates. If you're in special operation units like bike units, you wear shorts a lot, shorts, t-shirts, helmets. If you're in a K9 unit, you're going to wear heavier clothes because you have to run through bramble bushes and stuff like that all the time. So from our basic one is most of us will wear some type of heavier boots, something like that, that are more rugged, because we're always climbing up things and having to go places that normal people don't go. We always have a bulletproof vest on for the most part. Most agencies in the country have a bulletproof vest that you'll wear, something like this, that you'll have. You're going to have, in terms of the bat belt, the police officer belt, you're going to have right off the bat, you're going to have your firearm, your sidearm. You're going to.
I just got done interviewing the police officer, and I learned a lot. And he told me about how they have different kinds of equipment on their uniform. They're always wearing a vest. He runs around, that officer, and most of the officers in Kent run around with 28 pounds on them. And that the police officers that work in Kent don't necessarily live in Kent because they try to keep their personal lives and their work lives separated. Okay, next. So in conclusion, doing all these 3 activities, I learned a lot, and each of them have a ripple effect, and they affect each other, but they impact themselves, most of them, because each of them have an emotional and mental connection to their job, and it affects them most of the time, and especially affects us because they're the one that's going to help us during emergencies.